Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. 2025 now, actually, we're in a whole nother year. Now, the big thing to keep in mind here is that within this particular phone, this is still a really decent device to go and pick up, especially when it comes down to the price tag. This phone doesn't really cost that much money, but it still is kind of pricey compared to what you could be getting. So we'll take a look at this throughout this whole entire video. But if you want to pick up this phone or some other phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of this particular phone, this phone originally came out back in 2023. So it's not that old of a phone, it just came out about like a year and some change ago. So on the front side of this particular phone, you're actually getting a pretty good sized display. This thing is a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display. So it's 1080p and it's a pretty good looking phone nonetheless. Like I do think if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, this thing does look pretty good for the most part. So I do think that is somewhat of a pretty interesting thing to kind of keep in mind there. So this phone looks good, it performs fairly good for the most part. It's a 120 Hz display as well, 1450 nits of brightness, and it's a hole punch display and those types of things that you'd expect from a phone nowadays anyways. So definitely, at least on the exterior, I think it's a good looking phone. It definitely is a good phone for the most part, at least from the outside that you can tell. So at least from the exterior side, that kind of covers it up there. Now, when it comes down to the rest of the phone, this phone also has a USB Type-C port on the bottom, which is always nice to have. Flat sides all throughout. On the back side, you're getting the standard glass back. So as I said before, it's always nice to kind of have these like standard glass backs, but for us, the glass backs are so much better. You're also getting that triple camera setup on the top left corner as well. So that in and of itself is another really cool thing going on for this phone. You're getting wireless charging on this phone, reverse wireless charging. And for the most part, for a 2023 phone, there's a couple things that can definitely kind of hit on this phone that kind of make it seem a little bit outdated in some ways. Number one, the brightness of this panel. It's not terrible, it's not a terribly bad panel or anything like that, but you are getting much better panels, nowadays with much higher brightness. So that is kind of a big thing to keep in mind. Also, there is pretty much noticeably more bezel on this type of phone rather than something like a Samsung Galaxy, S24 or S25. So if you kind of care about the bezel that much, then that might be one thing you'll notice. Another big thing is with the back, because you aren't getting that frosted glass back, this phone does end up feeling like a little bit of a more older type of phone, probably a little bit older than it should. I mean, this phone feels more like a Samsung Galaxy S10 or Galaxy S20 than something like a Galaxy S25. So those are kind of the big things and big reasons why this phone feels a little bit more outdated than it probably should have, but it's really not the biggest deal in the world, but that is one thing you'll end up noticing there. Now, on top of that, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is the price tag. As of right now, this phone basically cost about $312 on Amazon. Now, that is cheaper than what it was when it officially came out like brand new. But the thing with this phone is with its price tag, even in the used market, you can buy something like a Samsung Galaxy S23, like that standard S23 what this phone is based off of. You can buy that phone for about the same price as this one. So at that point, it's like, why would you even buy an S23 FE if you're already going in the used market to buy a phone? Why don't you just go ahead and buy a Samsung Galaxy S23, like the actual phone this phone was basically built off of? So I think that's kind of a big thing to kind of keep in mind there too. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but that is one thing you'll end up noticing there from that particular situation. Now, when it does come down to the cameras, luckily for you, this phone's camera is actually still really good. You're getting a 50 megapixel wide angle lens, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. So this type of camera and this type of phone in and of itself is still actually pretty decent for the most part. So you're going to be able to go through and pick up this type of camera and still get like a fairly decent type of layout for the most part. And I do think that in and of itself is a really nice thing to kind of think about, because this phone isn't really going to be like this crazy insane of a phone from that particular perspective when it does kind of come down to the cameras. It's not going to be that bad or outdated. You're still getting 8K capability on the backside as well, which is really nice. And you're getting 4K at 60 on the front side too, which that in and of itself is another really cool thing. But a pretty important thing I would say to kind of keep in mind here too is that when you are going to go through and pick up one of these types of phones, the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE in some ways does kind of feel a little outdated a little bit when compared to something like the Samsung Galaxy S25, because those phones are definitely going to be giving you overall better types of cameras. But if you're not really comparing them side by side, you're definitely going to feel like this phone is up there. It's going to feel very, very premium. And I do think this is going to be one of those types of phones that's going to hold up very well compared to something like the Samsung Galaxies of this day and age. So out of all the things you could complain about with this particular phone, the performance, at least from the camera side, is definitely not one of those types of things. So I think that right there is another big thing to kind of keep in mind there as well. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to the software longevity, this is where things start getting a little bit, I guess, finicky with this type of phone. So this phone is still supported with software. So it's still going to be supported with software for quite a bit of time. So at least for like another 2 years, which is not that long. But that's exactly my point. The problem that we kind of have right now within this particular device is that when you do actually take a look at something like the Samsung Galaxy S25, those particular phones are lasting for much longer periods of time than these ones in terms of years. Like this one only got 4 years of software support. The Samsung Galaxy S25 is getting 7 years of software updates. That is a massive amount of difference right there. So that right there is going to be giving you a much longer supported phone in every single way you can imagine. So that right there, I think is going to be another one of those big things to keep in mind there as well. Like if you're going to want to go ahead and pick up a device, it makes a lot of sense to go and buy a phone that's going to be lasting for a longer period of time. Unfortunately, with this device, it's still supported and everything like that, but when compared to the latest competition, that might not be the case. In terms of battery though, this phone is giving you a massive 4500 mAh battery, so that's a pretty big size battery to have inside of this phone too, and that can be another advantage. You know, when you look at the Galaxy S25, that one has a 4000 mAh battery, so this one does kind of have an edge over even that phone because it is going to be giving you a little bit of a bigger size battery when it kind of comes down to it from that side too, which I think is another really, really important thing to keep in mind. But then finally, this kind of takes us over to our performance. This phone is going to be giving us the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset inside with 8 gigs of RAM. Now, the thing with the Galaxy S23 FE's chipset with that Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset was that it was kind of already like a little bit of a shaky chipset. I don't know the best way to describe it, but it was a chipset that wasn't optimized the best. It was giving lots of problems and lots of issues. And because of that, that could have given a lot of people in that particular situation, you know, a phone that was overheating like crazy, that really wasn't performing that great. And that could have been a really big issue in and of itself. So I feel like from that side, that's kind of a big thing. Again, not the biggest deal in the world, but that could be one thing you might be experiencing there from that particular situation as well. So I think that is a big thing to keep in mind there too. But then finally, when it does kind of come down to how this phone holds up in 2025, I definitely will say the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE, it's a good phone, right? I like this phone a lot, but I just think that when compared to what you can get in the used market, like I feel like there's just better options for like the same amount of money. Like when you're taking a look at the Galaxy S23 FE, this phone is basically costing like $300 and something. Like I said before, you can buy a Samsung Galaxy S23, like the standard phone, for like the same exact price. Even cheaper probably in some cases. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy this phone. There are significantly better phones to go ahead and buy. So those are the ones I'd probably recommend buying more so than this thing. So kind of keep that in mind. Overall though, I like the S23 FE. I thought it was a good phone when it first came out. I just think there's just some better options out there when it kind of comes down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.